Some people don't feel alive when things are calm. They feel alive when things are tight, when the account is low, when the deadline is close, when the pressure is real. And if that sounds extreme, think carefully. Have you ever noticed that the moment your finances finally stabilize, you get restless? You don't relax, you don't slow down, you don't feel safe, you feel uneasy. It's almost like calm makes you nervous because pressure became your fuel. When money feels tight, you focus harder, you track more, you work faster, you feel productive. When everything is handled, when bills are paid, when savings are growing, your brain doesn't celebrate, it searches. What's next? What could go wrong? What am I missing? And if nothing is wrong, your brain invents something. A new upgrade, a new expense, a new commitment, a new goal that recreates urgency. Not because you're irresponsible, but because somewhere along the way, your nervous system learns something dangerous. Pressure equals movement, and calm equals stagnation. So you don't just manage financial stress, you recreate it. And that's why some people never feel relaxed, even when everything is paid. Most people spend years trying to fix their finances without realizing that the problem isn't the money. The problem is that their brain learned to need the pressure. And need is a much harder thing to restructure than a budget. If this feels slightly uncomfortable, that's good, because what comes next explains why your brain might be addicted, not to money, but to the feeling of being on the edge. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. Your brain doesn't actually crave money, it craves stimulation, and financial pressure is one of the fastest ways to create it. When things feel tight, your nervous system activates. Your body releases cortisol, your focus sharpens, you feel alert, needed, engaged. There is a strange clarity that comes from urgency. Pressure forces decisions, it forces movement, it forces action, and movement feels like progress, even when you're just preventing collapse. But here's the loop most people never see. When your finances are stable, your nervous system drops back to baseline. No spike, no urgency, no immediate threat demanding attention. And for someone who has lived in pressure for years, baseline feels uncomfortable. Calm doesn't feel peaceful, it feels empty. So, without realizing it, you recreate small forms of pressure. You stretch a budget slightly, you add a commitment, you say yes to something that keeps you activated. Not because you're irresponsible, but because your brain learned to associate stress with purpose. When there's pressure, you feel sharp. When there's urgency, you feel relevant. When there's something to fix, you feel valuable. And when everything is fine, you feel restless. That's why some people feel most in control when they're close to the edge, because edge equals intensity, and intensity feels like aliveness. But intensity is not stability, and if your nervous system only knows how to function under pressure, peace will always feel foreign. Not because peace is wrong, but because your system was never trained to recognize it as safe. Here's something almost no one says out loud. Financial stability can feel boring. No drama, no urgency, no crisis to solve. Just routine. Paycheck comes in, bills go out. Savings grow slowly. Nothing dramatic happens. For a brain wired to respond to spikes, that rhythm feels flat. Think about how you behave when money is tight. You check your bank account more often. You calculate constantly. You optimize purchases. You feel sharp, engaged, alert. Now compare that to months when your balance is comfortable. You check less. You think less about it. There's no emotional spike attached. Urgency gives you dopamine. Calm gives you neutrality. And neutrality can feel like nothing. So some people unconsciously keep themselves slightly stretched, not broke, just tight, not collapsing, just close enough to the edge to feel activated. If you leave only $300 of margin each month, even though you could leave $1,000, your brain stays alert. Every purchase feels meaningful. Every decision feels important. That importance creates stimulation. But stimulation isn't growth, it's manufactured scarcity. And manufactured scarcity demands constant vigilance. Here's a simple test. Think about the last time you had a genuinely comfortable month. No pressure, no tight deadlines, no financial tension.
How did you feel? If the honest answer is restless or uneasy instead of relieved, that tells you something important about what your system actually needs. And what it needs isn't more money, it's permission to stop performing. When every week is spent reacting, adjusting, containing, you never look up. You never ask the questions that require stillness. Not, can I afford this, but do I even want this life? Not, how do I survive the month, but why do every month feel like survival? Pressure keeps you too busy to examine the architecture, and that's its most dangerous function. Not the fatigue, not the stress, but the way it fills every corner of your attention so nothing deeper can surface. Think about the last 12 months. How many decisions did you make from pressure versus preference? How many times did you choose something because it was urgent, not because it was right? You've spent more energy this year managing tension than deciding what you actually want. And that's not an accident. It's the design your nervous system chose for you. Because here's the truth that stops people cold. You don't fear being broke, you fear being still. Because stillness asks questions that pressure lets you ignore. That's why some people fill every margin the moment it opens, not with recklessness, with smart commitments, reasonable upgrades, responsible new obligations, each one individually logical. Together, they rebuild the cage. And the cost isn't just money. It's the version of your life that never gets considered, the ideas that never get bandwidth, the changes that never get explored, the conversations that never happen because you're always busy holding the month together. Pressure doesn't just exhaust you, it replaces you with a manager, a calculator, a crisis handler. And somewhere underneath all of that, there's a person who stopped asking what they actually want. If pressure feels productive, then calm can feel threatening. When things slow down, your brain doesn't immediately register safety, it registers silence. And silence leaves room for thoughts you've been outrunning. Without financial urgency, you start noticing bigger questions. Am I actually happy? Do I like this pace? Is this life aligned with what I want, or just what I can manage? Pressure protects you from those questions. It keeps you busy enough not to examine the structure. That's why some people sabotage stability the moment it arrives. They take on new commitments right after paying off debt. They upgrade expenses right after increasing income. They reintroduce tension the moment breathing room appears. Not consciously, but predictably. Because calm requires something most people have never practiced: identity beyond productivity. Let that land. If you're not solving something, who are you? If you're not managing pressure, what defines your value? If no one needs you to hold things together, what's left? That's the question that pressure protects you from, and it's the reason financial ease can feel disorienting. Not because you don't want it, but because you've never lived inside it long enough to find out who you are without the weight. Peace requires trust, pressure requires control, and control feels safer to a tired nervous system. So you stay close to the edge, not falling, just leaning, not broke, just tight, not collapsing, just activated. And here's the detail that makes this pattern so hard to break. It doesn't feel like self-sabotage. It feels like responsibility. It feels like being smart with money. It feels like staying sharp. The disguise is perfect.
There's a difference most people never consciously separate: being needed and being stable. When you are needed, there is always urgency. Something depends on you, something requires action, something would fall apart if you stopped. That feels powerful, it feels important, it feels like proof that you matter. But stability is different. Stability doesn't require constant intervention. Stability doesn't need you on high alert. Stability works even when you step back. And here's the uncomfortable part. If your financial life only works when you are constantly managing it, adjusting it, calculating it, that isn't stability. That's dependency. The system depends on your vigilance. You depend on the pressure to feel engaged. It becomes a loop. You create tension. You manage tension. You feel valuable for managing it. But nothing actually becomes lighter. And when something does become lighter, When a debt disappears, when income increases, when expenses calm down, you don't always relax. You replace the pressure. New goal, new stretch, new edge. Because being needed feels safer than being supported. But a life built on being constantly needed is fragile. If you burn out, the system shakes. If you slow down, things wobble. If something unexpected hits, there's no buffer, only you. Real strength isn't being the load-bearing wall. Real strength is building something that stands without you gripping it. And that shift from necessary to supported changes everything. Not because the numbers change first, but because the nervous system finally learns that letting go doesn't mean losing control. It means the structure was built to hold. Let's make this practical. Imagine someone earning $5,000 per month. For years, they live at $4,700 in expenses. Tight, controlled, alert. They know every number, every date, every bill. Now, imagine they get a raise to $6,000. For a moment, there's space. Then slowly, expenses rise. A better plan here, a small upgrade there, an extra subscription, a slightly larger commitment. Within 6 months, expenses are $5,800. Not reckless, not dramatic, just tight again. Why? Because tension was familiar. Loose space felt foreign, and the nervous system unconsciously closes the gap. This isn't stupidity, it's conditioning. If your identity was built around handling pressure, you will unconsciously recreate environments where pressure exists, because that's where you feel sharp, that's where you feel useful, that's where you feel alive. Now here's the part that makes this painful to see. That person didn't waste the raise, they didn't blow it on something reckless. They absorbed it into the same structure of tension they were already living in. The income changed, but the pattern didn't. And the pattern is what determines how life feels. But here's the cost. Constant pressure keeps cortisol elevated. Constant vigilance drains cognitive bandwidth. Constant almost there prevents real rest. You're not financially struggling. You're structurally addicted to the edge. And until you see that clearly, every raise, every breakthrough, every improvement will quietly return you to the same feeling. Tight, activated, necessary, but never calm and never free. Now imagine something different. Not more money, not fewer responsibilities, just space that stays open. Imagine your expenses sitting at $4,000 while you earn $6,000, not because you're depriving yourself, but because you stopped filling every margin. The first thing that changes isn't your bank balance, it's your nervous system. You wake up without scanning for threats. You check your account once, not 10 times. A surprise expense appears, and instead of adrenaline, you feel inconvenience. That's it. Inconvenience. No identity threat, no urgency spike, no performance mode. And something subtle happens inside you. You stop equating pressure with purpose. You stop mistaking tension for productivity. You realize that your sharpness wasn't coming from stress, it was surviving despite it. And when survival isn't required, creativity returns, patience returns, clarity returns. You begin making decisions based on preference, not pressure. Here's what that looks like on a Tuesday afternoon. Someone suggests a dinner out, and instead of mentally calculating whether the month can absorb it, you just say yes. Not because you're rich, but because the margin exists. That moment, that absence of hesitation, is what freedom actually feels like. Not luxury, just room. And that is disorienting at first, because if you're not proving yourself through management, you have to redefine who you are. That's the real shift, not financial, psychological. The edge stops being your home, and for the first time, you're not living one step away from activation. You're operating from margin. And margin feels quiet. Here's the part that actually changes things. Not understanding the pattern intellectually, but catching it in the moment it happens. Because you will try to rebuild the pressure, not tomorrow, not eventually, soon. And it will feel completely rational when you do.
It'll sound like this. I could upgrade to the better plan. It's only $30 more. This new commitment makes sense. It's an investment. I should lock in this opportunity before it disappears. Each one reasonable, each one logical, each one slowly closing the margin you just created. This is the moment that separates people who understand the pattern from people who actually break it. So here's a tool, not a budget, not a spreadsheet, not discipline. A question. Every time you're about to add a new financial commitment, ask yourself, am I choosing this because I want it or because the space feels uncomfortable? If the honest answer is that the space feels uncomfortable, that's your nervous system trying to recreate the edge. That's the addiction talking. And recognizing it in real time is the only thing that interrupts the loop. You won't get it right every time. Some months you'll catch it, some months you'll fill the margin and only realize later. That's normal. But something shifts once you start noticing. The automatic quality of it breaks. What used to happen unconsciously now requires a decision. And decisions can go either way, but at least you're choosing instead of defaulting. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is awareness at the moment of choice. Because the pattern doesn't break with one big revelation. It breaks with dozens of small moments where you see the cage being built and you choose not to add the next bar. That's not discipline. That's freedom practiced in real time. Here's the truth most people never confront. You don't need financial pressure to be productive. You don't need tight margins to be sharp. You don't need the edge to feel valuable. That belief was installed slowly. Maybe you grew up watching adults stress about money. Maybe your early wins only came when things were urgent. Maybe you learned that pressure equals progress. But pressure is a stimulant, not a foundation. Stimulants create spikes. Foundations create stability. And if your entire sense of momentum depends on urgency, you will unconsciously protect urgency, even when it drains you, even when you could choose differently. The real flex isn't earning more, isn't grinding harder, isn't proving you can handle intensity. The real flex is building a system that works without you gripping it, a system with margin, a system with redundancy, a system where your absence doesn't create collapse. Because when pressure stops being necessary, something profound happens. You don't slow down, you become precise. You don't lose ambition, you gain clarity. You don't feel less driven, you feel less threatened. And that difference changes how you earn, how you spend, how you build. This channel isn't about hustle fantasies or guilt-driven discipline. It's about structure. It's about margin. It's about understanding the invisible patterns that decide whether your life feels tight or sustainable. If this video made you recognize something you couldn't name before, subscribe. Not for motivation, for awareness. Because once you stop being addicted to financial pressure, you stop living on the edge and start building from solid ground. And that's where real wealth actually begins.